One of the most common conversations I'm having right now is with people who bought their first home 5, 7, even 10 years ago. They're sitting on a really low interest rate. They've built some meaningful equity. Their income has gone up, but they find themselves asking, is it time to move? And truly, I really think that that's the wrong question that they should be asking themselves. The question isn't whether or not you can move. The question is whether or not you should move. Because sometimes moving up is absolutely the right decision. And sometimes spending some money on your current home is the better financial move. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I help guide my clients and evaluate the decision so you can figure out whether it's time to move out of your starter home. So let's start with the first obvious question that we should ask ourselves. Have you owned the home long enough for it to make financial sense? Generally speaking, I like to see people live in a home for at least 5 to 7 years before they move. That's what I prepare them for prior to the purchase. That's not a hard rule. There definitely are exceptions. The markets change, life happens, but selling a home is expensive. You have closing costs, you have moving expenses, you have the next home, you have repairs that you need to make to your current home, and you may have to buy furniture. You may have improvements that you need to make the home more marketable. And all of those things really add up. So generally speaking, when I'm talking to my clients, I want to see enough appreciation and enough equity, so that's the pay down plus appreciation, that difference between the two, that those costs don't completely wipe out the benefit of moving. If you've owned your home for several years and you still built a healthy amount of equity, that's usually the first sign that moving up may be worth exploring. But equity alone does not mean you're ready, which brings me to the second question. Are you financially ready? This is where a lot of people stop being honest with themselves because the pain of their current home or their desire for the next home can quickly outweigh their logical reasoning brain. Just because you can technically buy doesn't mean that you should. One of the things I like to see from move-up buyers is enough equity to put down at least 20% on the next home. Now, if you bought your first home with 3%, 5%, or even 0% down, that's okay. Your first home is really about getting onto the property ladder. But by the time you're planning to move up in homes, I want to see people in a stronger financial position before pulling the trigger on that. I want to see 20% down. I want to see a really healthy, robust emergency fund. I want to see retirement savings on track and not going to be affected by any potential increase in mortgage. And I do not want to see people putting themselves in a fragile financial position just to afford the next best thing, because the goal is not just to get a better, bigger house. The goal is to improve your life without creating financial stress. So one of the things that we're going to look at when we're in this phase is don't look at the interest rate, look at the payment. As a general guideline, I like housing expenses to stay around 25% of take-home pay. Maybe 30% if your other financial goals are fully funded and you're in a really strong financial position. But the good news is if you've owned your home for a while, your income has probably increased since you bought it. So that 25% may be greater than what it was when you bought your starter home. So while your next payment may be higher, it doesn't necessarily mean it takes up a larger percentage of your budget. That's the number that matters. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you even want it to be less, it can be less. You're the one that needs to be comfortable here. Okay, so here is where I talk to people and we try to figure out if they truly need to move, because some people do not need a bigger house. They need a different house. And some people don't need a different house at all. So the question that I ask to help discover this is your home creating daily friction? This is the number one indicator that I see that says, yes, it is time to move. How do we make this happen? Is your home creating daily friction in your life? Not occasional frustration. Like I'm talking daily friction. It could be things like too few bedrooms. Maybe you have kids stacked on top of each other and it's causing, fights and disruption. Maybe you have one bathroom for a 5-family household. Maybe you have no office space and you work from home now and you didn't previously. Maybe you do not have enough storage. Maybe you have a tiny yard for your really active dog. Maybe your commute has just gotten brutal. Or maybe stairs are becoming more difficult to manage and you can look into your future and see that stairs are not in that future. These are a few things that can wear on you every single day. But I want you to separate those frustrations into two categories: temporary problems and permanent problems. Temporary problems might be a couple of teenagers that are fighting all the time sharing a bedroom. This is a busy season of life, but it is technically a short-term inconvenience. for example, maybe you have 3 teenagers and 1 bathroom. That's frustrating. I get that. But if those kids are going to be leaving home in the next few years, is that frustration temporary? Yes, because I have seen people make the mistake of buying a significantly larger home for a season of life that is almost over. Then a few years later, they're trying to downsize again. Now let's talk about permanent incompatibilities. These are things like you now run a business and the business that you run requires you to have a shop, or maybe you need acreage to run that business. Maybe you need a different school district who has needs that require a specialty program that your school district doesn't offer. Maybe you want a shorter commute because it's taking an hour of your day every day. Maybe you need a single-story home because aging in place is getting difficult. Those are not temporary. Those are fundamental lifestyle issues. And those are most often more legitimate reasons to move. And the reason that I say that is I don't want you to just move to solve a temporary problem. So a question that we can ask ourselves here now is, can you solve the problem for less than the cost of moving? This is the question I think more homeowners need to be asking themselves. Can you solve the problem for less than the cost of moving? Because moving and selling a home is expensive and not every problem requires a new address. If you hate your kitchen, can you remodel it or fix the things about it you specifically hate? So for example, I hate in my kitchen how non-functional the different drawers and cabinets were. So I added aftermarket pieces to make it much more functional for myself. If you need another bathroom, can you add one, or can you remodel yours to make it more functional, kind of like my parents did in the example I gave earlier? If you need more usable space, can you finish a basement? Can you reconfigure what you already have? Maybe you have a den or a bonus room that could be turned into an additional bedroom in the meantime. Sometimes people are sitting on a significant amount of equity, and using a portion of that equity to improve their home they're already in may make more sense than buying and selling and getting something else. And remember, if you make smart improvements, you're often adding value to the property at the same time. But there are some things you just simply can't change. I understand that. You can't move the home to a different school district. You can't add acreage very easily. You can't magically create a shorter commute. And you can't always make a 2-story home work if you need single level living. And shops are often surprisingly expensive to build relative to the value they add to a property. Now, those are situations where moving often becomes the better option. So now let's take some time to talk about the elephant in the room, the thing that has a lot of people feeling really stuck right now: interest rate. And I hear things like, but I have a 2.75% interest rate. I'd move if I didn't have this really, really cheap mortgage. And I hear you. I understand. I don't want to give up my mortgage rate either. Giving up a low rate hurts. But a low interest rate in and of itself is not a reason to stay in a home that no longer fits your life and your needs. You have to remember, the mortgage is a tool. The house is where you live your life every day. Still fits comfortably within your budget. Don't let the interest rate be the only factor making the decision. Now, am I saying ignore interest rates? Absolutely not. They are important, but they are one factor, not the only factor. I have seen people stay in homes that they dislike because they're emotionally attached to the interest rate. And I've seen people move into homes that fit their lives dramatically better and never regret the decision. Focus on the payment, focus on the budget, focus on the lifestyle, not just the rate. The next question I ask people when they're thinking about the move up is, are you building a life by design? And this is where things get a lot more personal and I get to know my clients a lot better. Your first home often serves a very specific purpose. It gets you into home ownership. It gives you really good stability. It gets your needs met. It helps you start building wealth and meaningful equity. But eventually what happens is many people reach a point where they want something more intentional. Not because they're keeping up with the Joneses, because somebody else buying a newer, fancier house is not a reason to buy a house. And if I have not said that loud enough in this video, I'm saying it right here. Keeping up with the Joneses is a way to get yourself into trouble, not financially. And you shouldn't be buying because someone else has something nicer. Those are the worst reasons to move. If you're buying a home to impress other people, you're very likely going to be disappointed. Instead, ask yourself this: What does my life actually look like? What do I want to build my life towards? What do I want it to look like in the future? And it could look like a workout room, a pool, some land, be able to spread out and not see a neighbor, a shop in order to do all your hobbies, a better entertaining space because you entertain on a regular basis, a larger garden, a hobby room. Maybe you would really like a craft room. For us, one of those things was definitely a pool. Did we need a pool? Absolutely not. But we could very, very clearly see an image for our lives and an image for our future where we built a life around it. Hosting friends, spending summers outside, creating memories. We actually host birthday parties for a lot of our friends all summer long, and our calendar for the summer fills up way in advance with friends and family. Now, that pool wasn't about status. That was about lifestyle, what we wanted our lives to look like. We wanted our house to be the house that people wanted to go hang out and spend time at. Your starter home gets you into the game. Your move up home should help you build the life you actually want. Okay, so let me give you a personal example. Our starter home was in North Dakota. Cannot recommend. It had 3 levels. It had an upper floor, a main floor, and a basement. And we actually used the basement as like our primary suite because it was actually really easy to like keep a good temperature. And at the time that we bought this home, it solved a very, very important problem. Housing there was very, very expensive. It was artificially inflated. Rental prices were crazy. I knew people who were living in studio apartments for $2,000 a month in North Dakota. Rent was expensive. We needed somewhere affordable to live. So it worked. But over time, we realized some things. The constant stairs, especially as my body was aging and I had joints that were starting to have issues that required surgery, the constant stairs were becoming less and less manageable. Cleaning 3 levels got really, really old. Lugging cleaning equipment up and down 2 sets of stairs, maintaining those 3 levels got really old. The cost of needing to paint and things was so much more expensive because the house was so tall. And we also realized our long-term vision for our life wasn't there. We always knew that we weren't going to end up in North Dakota. We knew we wanted to be closer to family. We wanted to be closer to the mountains. We wanted to be closer to beaches. We wanted to be closer to the lifestyle, how we wanted to live our life we actually enjoyed. And that meant things like hiking, traveling locally, eating good food, those things, the things that I talk about in my videos all the time. So when we bought again and we bought our new first house here in Yakima, we knew ourselves a lot better. We knew a 1-story home would be much easier on us. We knew that lower maintenance materials really, really mattered. And we knew we wanted features we would enjoy for years. The house wasn't just about shelter anymore. It was about supporting the life that we wanted to build. Now, if you're trying to decide whether it's time to move out of your starter home, here's the framework I want you to remember. I want you to ask yourself, have I owned my home long enough? What kind of equity do I have in my home? Am I financially ready to make this move? These are things that a realtor can also help with because we can help by giving you a market analysis and an estimated net proceeds sheet. Is my home creating daily friction in my life that is wearing on me? Can I solve the problem for less than the cost of moving? And does this home I'm in now fit the future that I'm trying to build? Because if your home is creating daily friction and it doesn't fit the future you're trying to build and moving won't jeopardize your financial future, it's probably worth exploring whether it's time to move. And sometimes the answer is move, and sometimes the answer is stay and maybe do a remodel. And I help people work through that decision all of the time. So if you're here in Yakima and you're wondering whether that option makes sense for your situation, reach out. I'd be happy to help you evaluate both sides of the equation and figure out what makes the most sense for your goals. Again, I'm Corie Burke, local Yakima County realtor. And if you would like to stick around for a little while longer, of course you can subscribe, but also YouTube thinks you might like this video here. See you in the next one.